Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. We want to find out who's your next AG. That's going to be the title of this podcast. And I have a very special guest, Beth White, who is running for Attorney General in the great state of Indiana. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Glad to be with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. You're our first Hoosier on this podcast. I'm based in Jersey and I'm a Rutgers student, so I shouldn't be doing this, but I am doing this specifically for you. Go Hoosiers for now, for today. I'm Hoosier for
Thank
this
you
day.
for the day. And we will accept you and we will be welcoming like we always are.
Absolutely, yeah. So, a lot of my listeners are in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of, I think, one or two states that does not actually elect the Attorney General. It's actually the governor's decision. So, Indiana is a little different from New Jersey in so many different ways. But please tell me, what does the Attorney General do in your state?
Yeah, so it's a good and fundamental question. Of course, the Attorney General is the highest law enforcement officer in the state of Indiana. This office has pretty extensive power. The things that people mostly think about with an attorney general is just representing from a legal perspective state agencies. So people say it's the governor's lawyer. Well, that's not really true because they are a separate constitutional elected official. And even though the governor you know, deserves legal counsel, right? Every governor hires their own lawyer. So the attorney general's office does represent state agencies. So everything from approving contracts to suing on behalf of regulatory agencies who may or may not be, experiencing the kind of, compliance in the state of Indiana. So that is really day to day some core work. We also, in the Attorney General's office, handle criminal appeals, which is representing the prosecutors around the state. So when a person is convicted of a crime, in any county, we have 92 counties in Indiana. That conviction can be appealed, of course, to higher courts, and so the Attorney General's office handles those appeals. The Attorney General's office does. I say we because I'm putting into existence that I'm going to be the Attorney General, and that's a little awkward. So I will be careful there. The Attorney General's office also handles unclaimed property, which is kind of one of those weird things that when people when there are funds that are not claimed for various reasons by people in the Hoosier State, Attorney General's office has jurisdiction over those funds and seeks to return them to the proper person. The other thing that the Attorney General's office does is handle consumer protection. And I will just say that I think currently our current Attorney General is not doing particularly good job of that, but the office is tasked with protecting Hoosiers from fraud, from unscrupulous business and other kinds of actors. The Attorney General has an important role to play in protecting seniors from Medicaid and Medicare fraud, specifically as it relates to long-term care facilities and also nursing homes. So that's an important piece of it. And also just protecting all kinds of consumers from fraud in securities and financial instruments, which is something we learn about in law school. Everything from that to people who put roofs on houses to everything in between. And so it's a pretty broad portfolio of things that really are intended to represent Hoosiers, either individual in a context of consumer protection or unclaimed property, or Hoosiers who are having things done for them by the state. Everything from environmental regulation to making sure our highways are getting built, to our child protection agency is doing the appropriate and right thing. So that's a long answer to your short question, but it is a very powerful and important office. And I am seeking it because I really believe I am equipped to be an effective and a good attorney general.
It is a very broad job description, as you have described, especially since it is an elected position. So the voters have a lot to think about when they consider the decision they make as to who they vote for this position. The current
Absolutely.
AG is Todd Rokita, correct?
That's correct.
And it's interesting because I've been to Indiana a couple of times. I have family in Indiana. I remember when Mike Pence was considered too conservative for the state. Todd
Yes.
Rokita is more, I don't even want to say conservative, he's regressive. Uh, your state has changed in terms of the politics to some degree. Things have become more partisan. Obviously, Indiana has been a traditionally conservative Republican state, and you're running as a Democrat. And why do you think Indiana has trended more red recently? And how do you plan to appeal to some of those voters who might who might like what you have to say, but can't necessarily bring themselves to vote for a Democrat?
Well, I will leave the reason for our kind of pivot as a state to the right to the political scientists. I'm not that, and I studied that in college, but I will say this. In the time that I have been actively involved, not only as a lawyer, but as a political participant in our processes, we've been more of a purple state. We had three actual Democrat governors in the past, I don't know, 25 to 30 years. I served two of them. So I was there and present. We had Democrat United States senators, including Birch Bayh, Evan Bayh, and so those are the people who have served. They've served extensively. There was a time back when I was a young lawyer when we, of our congressional delegation, we had 10. Of course, we've lost one in redistricting since then, but we had 10, and 7 of them were Democrats, right? So this has not always been true that we are a specifically conservative state. But to your question, which I think is the important question, Todd Rokita is too extreme for the people of Indiana. He is doing things and he is saying things and he is using the office of Attorney General to move an agenda forward that is too extreme for the people of Indiana. And he is doing things that are hurting people. And I don't think that's the Indiana that I want to represent and that I have represented in past experiences in my career. I don't believe the people of Indiana are cruel. I don't believe that they want government to be used as a weapon against people, including women's reproductive rights, trans children who just want health care. I don't believe that the people of Indiana accept the behavior of Todd Rokita as the kind of behavior that we really want in our state government. And there, political theory is an interesting thing, and I studied it and I still pay attention to it. Conservative, liberal or progressive, all those things are interesting. Todd Rokita is extreme in what he's doing. And I don't think it falls into an ideology. I mean, the Republicans used to stand for smaller government. They used to stand for staying out of people's private business until they decide they don't like it. Things like reproductive care, things like health care, and then they're all in, right? Things like pronouns in the workplace. Todd Rokita, as recently as a month ago, had this big press conference to talk about how businesses shouldn't be required to use preferred pronouns in the workplace. He has signed on to a lawsuit to object to Title IX rules, and I'll get to that in a minute based on the work I do now. But that's just extreme. The Title IX rules exist in part to protect people from sexual violence both in their schools and in their workplaces. I mean, come on. Why is that controversial? That's not a conservative philosophy. That's an extreme philosophy. And it's a philosophy that I don't believe the people of Indiana want. And so I'm running this race because I'm motivated by the notion that that's just unacceptable. That what he's doing and what he's saying and the things that he stands for, they're not ideological. They're just extreme. And I think we need to stand up to that and to say what's true, which is that the government is here to serve people and to stay out of their private medical and other decisions.
Right. And I call, I don't call it conservative, I call it regressive and extreme, because that's exactly what it is. This is cultural
Correct.
stuff. And I agree with you. I think a lot of Hoosiers do not really care about the culture war stuff, especially considering the fact that Mike Pence barely won his race for governor the one time he ran. And I've heard, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the reasons why Donald Trump picked him in 2016 was because there was a chance that he was going to lose his reelection. And as a result, he wanted a politician who couldn't necessarily say no. Do you think that Mike Pence would have won reelection for governor?
I have been in this business a long time and I have stopped saying woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Because that's why we have elections. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with Mike Pence with about much of anything. He did the right thing on January 6th.
Mhm.
I stayed up all night to wait and watch him do it, right? Because what I think of all the philosophical things I disagree with Mike Pence about, he understands constitutional principles, right? And he did the right thing one time, for the right reasons. I wouldn't speculate what Donald Trump was thinking about. Clearly, Mike Pence stands for a conservative philosophy, and he, I think it's deeply held, and God bless, right? I stand for a political and moral philosophy that is just different. And I think it is just as important and just as deeply held, which is that people have a right to make their own medical and private decisions about everything from marriage to their reproductive care to their medical care for themselves and their children. And Todd Rokita and I just disagree about that, apparently. But I think that most Hoosiers are much more pragmatic
Right.
than Todd Rokita.
I
He
agree.
is he and some others in the legislature in Indiana, and I'm not running for the legislature, so I'm not so concerned about that. But Indiana is, a conservative Midwestern state that is falling behind, right? Falling behind in everything from how our wages have kept up with inflation to how well our children are doing in school to the cost of our healthcare. We have some of the highest healthcare in the country. And instead, as the attorney general, of focusing on those things, of focusing on how it is we can improve the lives of Hoosiers and make sure that young people in particular, have opportunities to be here and stay here and raise their families and get access to good care, health care, and to educate their children and to earn a living that supports them. Instead of focusing on those things, after 20 years of a pretty exclusive Republican rule, he's out there talking about pronouns in the workplace and talking about abortion records that he would like everyone to see so that we can sue providers. It's ridiculous. And he's misusing the power of the office.
Right. Well, to paraphrase Ronald Reagan's question, how does this make us better off today than we were 4 years ago if I were a Hoosier? So I totally get what you're saying. And I want to ask because healthcare is an issue that really unites a lot of voters from all walks of life. I believe that it was probably the winning issue for Democrats to take back the House in 2018. We had a congressman in South Jersey, Tom MacArthur, who ran as a moderate in 2016 and then revived the bill to repeal protections for pre-existing conditions. And his excuse was, well, I have a lot of constituents in this county because it was a pretty split district. Ocean County was more Republican, Burlington County was more Democratic. He said, well, the voters in Ocean County disagree with what you guys are saying. And he said this at a town hall in Burlington County. Problem is Republicans need healthcare too. And he paid for it, and his opponent Andy Kim, who is now running for our Senate seat, basically ran on a message of healthcare. So I want to know, did Indiana expand the Medicaid program? I think it was like it was kind of like a light expansion that kind of like do I have that right?
Yes, I mean we do. Indiana, we sort of we go half in, right? Not all in, not all. We did expand, but not to the extent that other states did. And so it's not great. We have terrible health outcomes, right? In Indiana, everything from smoking to obesity to access to primary care to infant mortality. I mean, Indiana's infant mortality rate is similar to some third world countries. I mean, it is ridiculous. And it's scary and it's unacceptable. Now, let's go back to Todd Rokita and his behavior. We have some very interesting data that I'm going to talk a lot about in this campaign from the School of Medicine about the ability to attract and retain clinicians and specifically doctors. Young people who want to become doctors and other kinds of medical clinicians do not want to train here. They do not want to do residencies here, and they do not want to stay here when they become actual full-fledged doctors because of the extreme policies in part of Todd Rokita. They are afraid of him wielding his power in the way he did against Caitlin Bernard. I know you followed that case. It was an international case. Should I set the stage for the Caitlin Bernard case?
You're talking about the woman from Texas.
No, this is about the 10-year-old from Ohio
Oh, yes, yes, uh-huh.
who came, yes. Dr. Bernard is one of our excellent clinicians here in Indiana. She's an OBGYN, and she provides life-saving, perfectly legal reproductive care to people. And as you, I'm sure, remember, it's probably been about a year and a half ago now, 10-year-old rape victim
Yep.
from Ohio, who, of course, at that time, prior to their referendum, was not able to get care in Ohio. She was brought here, this child was brought here. Caitlin Bernard compassionately provided her care. And then Todd Rokita decided that he didn't like it and he went after her license. And it was ludicrous. And it was international news. And of course, it was really a cautionary tale, I would say, for young people, not just OBGYNs, but any kind of clinician who might want to come and train here. I have a lot of friends who have either children or other young people in their lives who are in medical school. And to a person, They have said to me, I will never practice medicine in the state of Indiana. Now, what that has meant, to your point, everybody needs healthcare. What that has meant is we have places in Indiana, and I have a map where there are no OBGYNs. You cannot deliver a baby. We don't have pediatricians who are actively caring for children. And if you live in one of those places, you better hope that you don't have a complicated or challenging pregnancy. You are an hour, hour and a half, in some cases, 2 hours from a hospital with any sort of neonatal care that can deliver your baby. 2 hours. Now, you are a young man, and I don't think you've ever had a baby. I have had a baby. I have known many, many, many people in my lives who've had babies, and you always think it's going to be fine and great, and then sometimes it's not, right? And when you are 2 hours from a place that can care for you and your infant, right? It's a really scary thing, and that is happening all across the state of Indiana, and it is directly a result of what Todd Rokita is doing, because doctors do not want to be under the threat of someone like Todd Rokita with extensive power who is going to decide. I mean, now it was, in this case, it was abortion care for a 10-year-old child. Maybe next week it's going to be trans care for a 16 or 17-year-old. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, a hysterectomy for a woman that he's decided that shouldn't get a hysterectomy. I don't know. Maybe next week it'll be cosmetic surgery for a burn victim because he's decided that that's, I mean, I don't know. The parade of horribles in my mind just goes on and on. And it is unacceptable, and it's impacting everyone. If you are not a person of childbearing age, or you are a family for which abortion is a very it's a very dividing issue, right? People have very legitimate, deeply held beliefs, and I respect that. I happen to have the other side of that issue, which is I believe it's essential health care and should be available to people. But I know many people who don't agree with that, and I respect them. But everybody can agree that we need health care. And so that's an issue that kind of cuts across all demographics in Indiana. If you're a farmer in a small town in northern Indiana, you might want your grown children to come back to your community and live there and raise a family and keep your grandchildren close to you. Well, I'll tell you what they're not going to do: be 2 hours from a place where they can deliver their baby. That's what they're not going to do. And so all the sort of small communities around the state that don't have access to care, that's the reality, right? We talk about brain drain. We talk about losing our brightest and best. I mean, you've been to visit to Indiana, and you're sporting my alma mater shirt, so thank you for that. But I mean, we have, there it is. There it is. Go Hoosiers. Oh, I love that background.
I
That's
don't know
really
how
good.
that happened, but I'm happy that it did.
We're all happy. It's just
I,
the universe telling you that IU is a wonderful place. But in all seriousness, we
my
have
Rutgers
Purdue.
classmates are going to kill me when they see
I know
it.
they are. It's okay. I don't care. We have Purdue. We have
And that's
Rose
why you need to
Holman.
win.
That's right. We have Notre Dame. We have excellent universities in this state. The IU Dental School, the Cancer Center here in downtown Indianapolis, they do world renowned research. They are curing cancer about 5 miles from my house where I sit right now. All of this is happening in Indiana. We want our brightest and best to stay here and participate in that. And they're not going to. They're just not going to,
Right.
because of what Todd Rokita is doing.
People are afraid. And I think there is a big disconnect between Republican voters and Republican politicians, because anytime this issue of choice has been put on the ballot, no matter if it's Kentucky, Kansas, New Jersey, I mean, it wasn't in New Jersey, but any state where this gets
Ohio,
Ohio,
right next
Ohio,
door.
mhm. Ohio,
They
which is
voted it.
progressively more Republican. People just, I mean, I'm the same way. I'm not in favor of abortion, but I am pro-choice because I think that it's none of my business. And you never know when someone's going to, I mean, so yes, I agree with you. There is a big disconnect between the Republican voters and the Republican politicians, and people like Todd Rokita are clearly not representing what the people want.
Correct. And it's hurting people. That's the other thing. I mean, we talk about these philosophical debates in sort of a vacuum, right? It's all theoretical. Well, it isn't theoretical that we don't have clinicians who are coming here and staying here. It is not theoretical that our health outcomes are getting worse and worse, and our infant mortality rate is practically the third world. That is not theoretical. Those are actual people with actual lives and actual needs whose needs are not being met.
Right, and this infant mortality rate is if I'm correct, is a big problem in the Black community too. because on average they receive less care. So the people who are impacted are those who some members of society frown upon, and it shouldn't.
Well, let's say marginalized. Let's say marginalized communities, because that's not just race, but it's also ethnicity. Of course, our Latino, our Latina community, our undocumented folks, right? Of all descriptions. We have Haitian cluster here in Indianapolis. We have a number of Burmese refugees who have come because of all of the unrest in Myanmar. And those folks, some of whom, by the way, are citizens, are marginalized for
Yeah,
all kinds of reasons, and they have a harder time accessing care.
yeah.
And they're the future of this state. We are much more multicultural than we used to be. We're not as diverse as some places like New Jersey or other states. I want us to be welcoming. We say that the Hoosier hospitality is really a thing. Well, why don't we live it by making sure people have access to health care? It feels really basic to me.
I agree with you, and I want to get into your background a little bit because you're from Marion County, which is where Indianapolis is, and you've worked with you've done something regarding helping sex trafficking victims. Do I have that right?
You do?
Which is really tough work. I have family members who are social workers. That was part of their training. It takes a certain type of person to do that. So I thank you for what you did with regard to that.
Appreciate
So
it.
obviously, women's issues and women's rights are very important to you. Uh,
Mhm.
what do the female voters in your state say when you tell them about your platform, regardless of party or geographical location?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I have spent a really good part of my career fighting for victims, of people who are marginalized for all kinds of reasons, people who are vulnerable, right? Criminal prosecutor. I was chief counsel at DCS, the Division of Child Services, child abuse and neglected victims. I currently run the Indiana Coalition to End Sexual Assault and Human Trafficking. So we work all over the state with law enforcement, social workers, and medical professionals to help train and equip people to serve victims and also to do prevention, right? It would be better if we could prevent this kind of behavior. Um, Women are not a monolith. It is very interesting to me. We talk about the women's vote. We talk about, the black vote potentially. We talk about the Latino vote. They are not a monolith. And I think that although these issues of medical care and medical privacy, right? That's another thing. Everybody agrees on medical privacy, right? I think we should all agree about medical privacy. Those resonate in a way that's different with women. But I do hear from a number of women that the Democratic Party is just too, I don't know, too liberal. Like we're too, I don't know, crazy. It's the whole Nancy Pelosi, which I, by the way, love Nancy Pelosi and think she's awesome. She's the best speaker that we've had in my lifetime. But it's sort of that national approach, right? That we love to talk about the squad, right, and the progressive. I mean, my member of Congress is Muslim. It's Andre Carson. And I love Andre Carson, and I think he's amazing. This whole thing in the Middle East and Gaza has been really, really challenging, right? The people hear about those issues, and that is a lens through which they look at state and local politics. And so what I'd like women to focus more on is what we're doing right here in Indiana about our schools, our healthcare, and taking care of our children. Right? Let's take care of our children. This notion that that some groups of people are pro-life until a child is born and they need health care and food, and then their parents need childcare for them when they go back to work, right? I mean, those are things that that's pro-life, that's pro-family, right? That's pro-woman, right? Because we know disproportionately that the care of children, especially young children, falls more on women than anyone else, and that presupposes that there is an intact family, which there often isn't for various reasons. So this notion that we don't provide childcare, we don't provide healthcare. So um, it's interesting. These issues resonate with women, but they also many women are I don't know, distracted, if I could use that term, by what's happening at the national level, and I think it's too bad because what I know about politics, and I know a lot, is that many the politicians that are making decisions every single day that impact your life are not Nancy Pelosi. They're not the squad. They're not that whole thing that you hear about on TV. It's your school board. It's your city county council who, by the way, are going to raise your taxes, right? So I talked when I was clerk of Marion County, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I did a big curriculum in the high schools because I knew that the demographic that didn't vote was 18 to 24. And so what could I do? Well, I could go in the high schools, and we have a lot of high schools in Indianapolis. And so I did. With 24 different high schools, we registered thousands of young people to vote. I taught them about the equipment, and I talked to them about school board, about city council, about the things they pay almost no attention to that have a direct impact in their lives, because I want people to understand, right, that those are the levels of government that really do make a difference every single day. And vote, civic education and voter education is something that I took really seriously when I was clerk. And I think as Attorney General, there's a role to play there too. I mean, there is a bully pulpit in the Attorney General's office. Todd Rokita is getting on it and using it as a bully. But an Attorney General with a better approach, I think, can use that bully pulpit to talk about things that really do matter to Hoosiers, like access to care, like keeping costs low, like providing an infrastructure for childcare.
Right. And it's important that you mention that because the um the Attorney General's position, as we've stated previously, is very broad, and you have a lot of work to do once you're going to get into that position. And
Mhm.
I want to know, what do you think of your current governor?
Yeah. Well, our current governor is a lame duck. He is on his way out.
Mm,
I like Eric Holcomb, right? I mean, I think he has tried to be pragmatic. I
right.
think he's working with a legislature that sometimes isn't. One thing I know about government, that because I've served in it for a very long time. I was a criminal prosecutor. I served two governors, two mayors. I was elected in my own right. I know a lot about government. And what I know is that leaders have to figure out how to be collaborative and to work with other, not just branches of government, but the private sector, right? We talk a lot about healthcare, right? And keeping costs low. Well, who does that? I don't know, our providers. And how about insurance companies, right? And how about med schools who are training our providers? What about all of that? And so there's just a very complicated solution to these problems that involves collaboration. And all of this is to say, I think Eric Holcomb has been collaborative. I think he's been a collaborative governor. Everything is relative in politics, right? I used to think that, that I don't know, that the Republicans are all, really too extreme. He's not an extreme governor. He has done some things that I do not agree with. I think because of his need to work with the legislature, right? I mean, they pass bills and he can either veto them or not. He has done some vetoes, which I have appreciated, but not as many as I would have liked to see. But of course, you know, that's his role, right? And so I think he's been all right. I have a lot of concerns about who our next governor is going to be. Jennifer McCormick, our Democrat candidate, is a terrific candidate.
Mhm.
We have this really ironic situation. She used to be a Republican, and the guy that came out of the Republican primary used to be a Democrat.
Oh, that was Mike Braun, right? Your current senator?
So there you go. Mike Braun has not distinguished himself in in the Senate. I mean,
Right.
I don't know what he does except run around at the border and talk about, I don't know, keeping illegal people out of our country. I don't know. He hasn't done things that make lives better for Hoosiers, right? He has not. Because to your point, how are we better off having had Mike Braun in the Senate? I'd say no, we are not. I mean, we're not better off. We're not worse off. He has been a non-entity in the United States Senate. So now he wants to come here and be what? Get more responsibility as governor? I mean, I don't know why, campaigns are just one big long job interview. I wouldn't hire him to be our governor. Why would I? What track record does he have to show me that he is interested in moving the people of Indiana in a better place?
Right. And Indiana, like our state, has had a lot of very effective and very good politicians on both sides.
Correct.
I've heard good things about Richard Lugar.
Yes.
I've heard good things about Joe Donnelly.
Evan. Yeah,
Uh,
Joe Donnelly, who, by the way, is coming back from the Vatican. I don't know if you knew he was our
oh yes.
ambassador to the Vatican.
Okay.
But he's coming home. So yeah, I mean, look, there again, back to this bipartisan message. In the
Right.
time I've been paying attention, Evan Bayh was our governor, and then he was our senator, and Dick Lugar was our senator. Todd Young is currently one of our senators. My Democrat friends are going to get on me for this, but I think he's done a really good job.
I
I think
agree.
he's, I mean, I believe in the process, and we're going to run somebody against him in 2 years, and that's fine. But he has done some things that have made life better for Hoosiers, and And I have worked in Indianapolis also. I worked for Bart Peterson, who was the first Democrat mayor in 30 years. And then 8 years later, we elected a Republican. And I was the clerk. So my mayor was a Republican and I was a Democrat elected official at the county level. And, it just, and it's fine. I mean, Greg Ballard was a fine mayor. I didn't agree with everything he decided to do, but we've been very lucky because we've had good leaders who figured out how to work, you know, with everyone to make life better.
Right. And that's traditionally what Indiana's been about. And I know that you'll do great things when you get to that position and you'll work in a bipartisan manner. I want to know, how is the nomination process decided in the Democratic Party for the AG? Because I think it's a little different from the other offices, if my memory serves
It
me.
is.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right. So we have this convention race. At some time in the past, and I think it's been maybe 50 or more years ago, somebody decided that we needed to have convention races for Attorney General and for Secretary of State and for Lieutenant Governor. I don't know how you pick your lieutenant governors in New Jersey.
The lieutenant governor and the governor are package deals. So you're not going to, yeah.
I mean, that's sort of true here, although the
It's up to
Republicans
the
are.
governor, it's up to the gubernatorial candidate. So, Christie picked Kim Guadagno and Murphy picked his. So, yeah.
So that's sort of true in Indiana, although they also run in the convention, which I think is sort of weird. We've never had one contested until now. We have a Republican contested, Braun picked a young legislator woman who had been there one term. And then now there's a guy named Micah Beckwith, who is a pastor who has decided he needs to bring his special brand of Christianity to state government. So he's running against her in the convention. So I have an opponent in the convention on my Democrat side. She is a young woman who I don't know particularly well. She's never I've never worked on a campaign with her, never served in administration with her. So we've got 2,400 delegates, some elected, some appointed, some what we call super delegates, our state convention committee, state central committee, and people like that. And they're going to decide. So I have spent a fair bit of time in the last, couple of months reaching out to the delegates, talking with them, making the case to them that not only am I able to be a good candidate, which I think I am. And by the way, my opponent is actually a good candidate too. I hear her speaking all the time, and she's very articulate. She's able to articulate, I think, the core principles, the messages the Democrats have. The difference between the two of us is our experience. I've been a lawyer for more than 30 years, and in that time, again, I have served two governors, two mayors. I was a criminal prosecutor. I worked in a firm for a short time. I have been a leader in the government space and the not-for-profit space. I was clerk of Marion County for 2 terms. I did 14 elections, which is more than any clerk in the history of Indiana. I did the first same-gender wedding in the summer of 2014 in Indiana. So I'm really proud of that. We did this high school curriculum. We registered thousands of young people to vote. We leaned all the way into registration of new citizens, of seniors, of voters with disabilities. I mean, just using the office in 8 years to just be the biggest advocate we could be for the vote, right? And for people accessing the vote, understanding how it works. We expanded hours, we expanded locations, we did all of these things. Big office, millions of dollars, lots of employees. I have done those things. That makes me equipped.
We're almost out of time. Is it BethWhiteForIndiana.com?
Yes.
All right.
FOR Indiana.com. I'm sorry we're out of time because